Hello and welcome to the VISI 2022.1 release seminar. In this video we're going to be going over the CAD and CAM features for this version. So for our agenda we're going to go over the computer requirements, translators, user interface, drafting and modeling, surfacing, plot view and dimensions, analysis, mold and flow, progress, standard elements, reverse, the CAM navigator, electromachining, 2.5 axis, 3 axis, 5 axis, and wire EDM. So we're going to start with our TST tech support. We offer on-site and web training. We have helpline support via email, phone, and online at our website. We have tech days such as this for our webinars, seminars. And we have an unmatched level of support. Anybody that's called us can agree or can attest to this, that we do offer great support for our software. So with our rollouts, we offer some installation days. This will be something, for example, we could do over the web or on site, where we can actually help out with the installation of the new software, translate all of your settings from one version to another, and basically make your process as quick and smoothly as possible to do the transitions. So I'll go into the prerequisites. VISI does support Windows 10 and Windows 11 now. So Windows 11 is fully supported. You have to have the Pro versions, and they have to be the 64-bit versions. With previous version compatibility, work files saved in 2020.0 and versions prior can be opened in 2022.1. However, once saved in 2022.1, it is not backwards compatible. So I'll go into some of the new translators. Everything highlighted in this list shows what is new. The more particular ones is Parasolid version has been upgraded to version 34. Your SolidWorks, Solid Edge are now up to 2022. You do have the CATIA updates, or the CATIA has been updated, Inventor, etc. So same thing for the imports. We have some new features such as DDML and GLTF, as well as some upgrades to the NX Write translator, and your Parasolid version also being upgraded to version 34. So within 2022.1, you have the capability of basically managing what translator for the import-export your file type is going to use, such as alternative or traditional. So you can flip and flop between these using the custom and using the edit button right next to custom under system options. Within the transparency settings, it is now possible to set the default transparency for an export of a file. So you can force the import and export of a body transparency. And within a Parasolid, for an export, you can now export out face colors for the export. So when you're exporting a file out, the face colors will remain what they are in VISI and another product. And then within 3D PDF, you now have the capability of writing out mesh data from this. In previous versions, we were able to do wireframe and profiles. Now we are able to do mesh. So the translator is always improving. Within a SolidWorks import, it is now possible to define the whole features within the multi-simple features or within Feature Manager to be able to define for CAM much easier. So this is available in the traditional library for being able to do this. And then there have been some enhancements to the STL translator for importing in mesh data. These enhancements have been updated in the alternative library. And within Work and See, there's been some improvements with the translator itself as well. In recent versions, you could import in Work and See files into VISI. There have been improvements on it. So we'll go into the user interface updates. So some of the toolbars have been updated and modified to the relevant commands. So you'll see in the toolbars, some of these icons have been updated, such as in the query, such as pattern, such as some of the wireframe commands, etc. Within Save Part As, you now have the ability to save out solid instances. So if you have an instance in a file, Save Part As now has the capability of including that instance. You used to only be able to do this in Save As. Now you can do it in Save Part As. And within Surface Analyzer, you have the capability of undocking this or docking this icon to make the dialog bigger. So this command is included in the system dialogs as docked windows as well. For relevant edges and split line, it is now possible to control the overall default colors and the default thicknesses. This is done under System Settings, and you can see the dialog on the right. So you can change the colors and the thicknesses for relevant edges as well as split line edges. And within incremental translation, it is now possible to apply the incremental angle on multiple copies. So you can see in the picture there, you can start to see how the increment angle is going to take effect on every copy of what you're translating. Within layer management, additionally to the 2022.0 option, change layer index, there's been some improvements such as insert empty layer before, as well as move copy elements to layer is available inside of layer management as well. So here are the new options that you see here. We can also use the change layer index number, which will automatically link plot view pages as well as layer groups. So here in this video example, we have the change layer index. So if I go into here, I could type in whatever index number I want, and that automatically moves that layer to wherever I want it to go. I can move it back. And then a new enhancement to 2022.1 is I can also import in a layer before. So basically it puts a spacing between those areas. So for example, I have a spacing there. If, for example, I go into here, and let's say I want to copy an entity from one layer to another, I can just simply highlight that layer, right click on it, and say move copy elements to layer. So I could choose a move, I could choose a copy. I could also create an instance with this command as well. So if I highlight, you can see how it's going to include all of our plot view pages as well, and it will make a copy of that entity from one layer to another. We could also move it simply just by selecting the same option. So we have direct editing within our pre-selects. So this is a huge enhancement to the software. So without even having to be in a command, you pick an edge, you pick a face, you pick whatever, it's going to allow you to translate or move that. So here in this video example, I'm literally just picking a face. I'm not in any commands, and you can see how I can change the radius on the fly for that specific face. The same thing applies if I pick, let's say, this edge, I give it a distance. So right now, let's just say I type in a different distance, I add 50 millimeters or 50 whatever, 5 inches. You can see how we do a shift value. You can shift it either on one side, both sides, or all sides. So as you can see, we pick an edge. It's going to allow us to adjust and modify that edge without even having to be in a command. So it's basically using the edit faces command just by simply picking an edge. It's a nice enhancement, saves some time, don't have to go through the drop downs to get to certain commands. We pick this edge, for example, and when we go to change the length, we're essentially changing the thickness of the part. So we're editing and modifying that thickness just by simply picking this edge. So this is a big enhancement to the software without having to go into a command specifically. So within the interface, we also have selection templates. So you have the capability, if you pick a group of faces, to save that group of faces to reuse over and over and over again. So you don't have to actually input that data. Within ruler dimension, it is now possible, if you don't have an exact round number, to be able to select a ruler dimension and have the system automatically input the correct data for the math of being able to adjust a face or adjust an edge. You'll see that in this video example here. So the first thing we're going to do is go over the save previous selection. So I pick a group of faces. If this is a group of faces I'm going to be doing stuff with multiple times, I can hit the save button and then hit OK. And that is now a template that I can reuse over and over again on anything that involves a face selection. So if I go back to blends, I go to load, I see that blends option, and this saves in the file. So you can automatically have it so you select that saved face set. So now we're going to go into ruler dimensions. Let's say I'm trying to move this face. I'm trying to adjust this face right here. If I select the icon right next to the distance, I get these measuring tools and I can use a ruler dimension. Right now, I set this to whatever value I want. I pick, let's say, 60, and it automatically inputs the math for being able to actually put this in at 60. So it's doing the math for you within that ruler dimension. Matching faces. there's a new option to expand your selection for complex forms and patterns. So within the matching faces, this has been enhanced, so you have the ability to select the same feature on the same solid as well as the same pattern. So when using a contextual menu of selection, there's a new option to expand the complex features and forms. So here's just a quick video example showing that. So we did have matching faces in previous versions, but just to show the enhancements, you can see how it subdivides everything up into separate menus, expanding and collapsing these menus, and so on. So as you can see here, if we select same type, that enables a cylinder, and we can select same radius, and it highlights everything on that block of the same radius. If we do same hole, you can see how it's highlighting the entire hole. This includes that entire counterbore. If we do same, or if we just do it individually, you can see how it's selected individually, but same hole selects the same hole. If I go to same hole, same type, same radius, you can see how it selects all of those features. So this is a nice enhancement to be able to achieve the same thing to multiple parts. So if I turn off the same hole, we can select same feature. You can see how it selects the entire feature itself. So instead of picking individual faces within a command that involves face selection, turning it off, you see how it selects everything there. So same hole, and we can select same pattern. This allows me to select everything at one time. Connecting faces. There's a new option in the faces environment that allows you to select connecting faces. So when you're using block control, if you pick one face and then you draw a window, it only selects items of that face. And then with advanced filtering, it is possible to select elements with the same specific attributes from colors, styles, layers, parts list, properties, and geometry. So that's also another huge enhancement. So we'll just kind of go over these enhancements real quick here. So I'm using a command that involves faces environment. I'm going to use block control as far as my selection, but before I do, you can see how when I'm drawing a window, it's selecting everything within that window. So here's block control. Let's say I pick this face right here. If I use this new option called select connecting faces, drawing a window, it only picks the faces that that selected initial face chose. So it's not picking anything else. If I pick another face just by simply selecting it, and then I draw another window, it will pick that group of faces as well. So it makes it easier to choose individual face groups when it comes to selection. As you can see, we changed the colors of those specific faces using the select connected faces. So kind of continuing on, we are going to go over our new selection options. So previously we had selection by color or line styles, but this has also been enhanced. So it's now called advanced filtering. And you can see how we can still do our filtering by color. Picking specific color only lets us select that specific color and style. But now we have pick by specific layer, pick by specific name, by specific property, and by specific geometry. So you could do multiple different things. So if we select by specific property, inside the parts list, you could choose whatever field that you want it to only select from. So if you say get properties, you choose the specific item for the properties you're going to get. And then if you use the select all entities or select properties again here, it only is going to allow me to choose whatever is selected in that. So as you can see, I picked that component. It only chooses that component based on the properties that I've specified here. If I filter it by geometry, I could say, okay, filter this by whatever the volume is of this part. And based on that, it's only going to pick the same parts that have the same volume as what was previously selected. So this advanced filtering has been really enhanced. So as you can see, when we have our filters set for both the properties and the geometry, it doesn't select anything. But when we have one individually selected, it selects all of them. So as you can see, we drag and drop, and it's going by properties now. And then we could also filter by layer. So whatever's in the same layer as what entity you're selecting, it will choose everything in that layer. So you can see how this has been vastly improved upon. It's choosing everything that was in that layer of whatever selected. If we do a select all, we don't have to worry about using a drag window. So we're going to go into some of the new features within drafting and modeling. So within Create Profile, there's a new option to be able to choose whether you're going to create a profile or use dissolve aggregates and create that into wireframe. This option is included in rectangle, slot, circular slot, and polygon. So you can see we have this option to create as profile. If we uncheck that, it creates it as wireframe. Within split elements, there is a new option to automatically split all selected elements at their intersections. So you can manage a minimum distance. So basically, if your elements are not exactly touching, if they're within that minimum distance and they cross, it will allow you to split it. There's an option to join ends at split for virtual intersection points. And for multiple selection, the dialog command is automatically prompted for selecting sections that work basically before the option here. So you see the dialog that we have, all the new highlighted features are available in split elements. Within circular cross, there's a new option to allow you to create a circular axis around a radial orientation. It is possible to select circular edges on a solid. So as an example, you can see how we pick multiple entities and it's going to basically create a circular cross around it. Within 2D chamfer, negative values have been prevented in both slider labels for first and second distance. So if we go to annotation, just showing the circular cross, we've got a new command called circular cross. You go into here, you select your group of circles, and basically when it's selecting this group, it's creating a cross around those circles. The center cross is going to be in the orientation of the circle unless told otherwise. And then you can also align it to the axis. So you can see how it's creating the circular cross, or depending on how you have it set. So if I go into circular cross and I select some entities on both sides, we could choose to have it go through a full circle with the cross section, as well as go through just an individual entity. So you can see how I'm picking this group. You can see how it goes all the way around. So we can turn off create circular. We could turn it on axial. And then you can see how it's creating that crosshair cursor all the way around. With Project on Workplane, it is now possible to select edges to be able to create your wireframe squared to the workplane. And within Edit Elements, it's now possible to input in a coordinate system and type in your XYZ values for being able to translate and drag and drop from. Reprocess curves. The command has been improved with a new user interface. You can now preview actions and select the curves. The graphic nodes and control points have been upgraded as well, such as curves, corners, concatenation points, etc. And there are 3 new options within here. Reprocess curves has been modified to add simplify, repoints, and reprocess. And you can report values, number of control points, before and after the operation have been done. So you can see the dialog box looks just like other dialog boxes as well. There's a preview option, there's a checkbox to confirm or cancel. So here's just a quick video example of the reprocess curves. So if I go to select this one, you can see how we have our modes. We can have repoint, reprocess, force, etc. You can see how it's a standard dialog box just like all the previous ones, and you can see how we can change our number of points. You can see how it shows the number of points that it has. You can remove rejoining points, and you can see what it looks like before and what it will look like after. So basically we have checkboxes instead of a specific drop down to choose what we want. So we select repoint. You can see how it's doing a preview, and we could see this without having to close out of the command. This is a nice enhancement to this command, as previously you just hit the checkbox, you're guessing, having to undo it, redo it to get the correct results that you want. So if we go to simplify, you can see how it's going to simplify those, and so on. So we're going to go over 2D fillets. It is now possible with some improved enhancements to fillets to be able to create a radius that's smaller than the area. The curve linear will extend to it, making it a smaller distance, and it will automatically trim using graphic sliders. So you can see in this video example, I have some 2D fillets that I want to insert in. We'll start with the blend with curve command first. So basically I pick my starting edge, starting point, ending edge, ending point, and we can create a clean transitional blend between those areas. But to kind of go with what this enhancement is, for the next step, we're going to go into our fillet command. And I pick, let's say, between the two areas. I could actually decrease that radius so you can see how it's extending the lines, making the radius smaller. This is a really nice enhancement, as previously we were not able to do that. So within BreakDirect, there's two additional options that have been added to BreakDirect. You can dissolve a profile, you can concatenate a profile, basically joining profiles together or dissolving them. So it is also possible to concatenate existing profiles with wireframe when using the BreakDirect command. It is also possible to break a self-intersecting profile, removing the wrong portion. So here's just a quick video example of that. So if we go to BreakDirect, you see the two new options. You can dissolve the profile, which dissolves and strips away the attributes. You can also concatenate the profile as well. So if I undo that, select dissolve, we pick this, it dissolves that into wireframe. If we turn off dissolve and go to concatenate, when I do my BreakDirect, it's going to concatenate the shapes together. So if we select this, you can see how that's concatenated. You can see how that's concatenated. It saves you a lot of time and saves you an extra step without you having to concatenate the profiles after they're already created or without having to recreate a closed profile. So this is nice when it comes to creating profile boundaries around something. As with the BreakDirect command, you now can concatenate those entities together. So text type defaults, this is requested by many of you guys. Within system dimensions or annotation local dimension parameters, you now have the ability to, under the text window, change your default from static text to create text as profile, to dynamic text to wrap text, whatever you want. You now have the ability to set that default. And within solid and surface commands, you can also control the default transparency as well as the default color within most of these commands. So on the fly, you could change the colors without having to go to change attributes, again, saving yourself a step. There have been some new commands added to the pattern dropdown. The first one is called matrix pattern. This command allows you to create copies along two directions. There are two modes for this as well. You've got total length and spacing. And then there's a new enhancement called radial pattern. This command allows you to create copies in a circular pattern along a radial direction as well. So you'll see this in the video example. So if we go to modeling pattern, you see the two new commands, matrix and pattern. If we select our face here, previously we'd be able to translate it in one direction. So you choose that area, you choose what you're going to copy, how many copies you're going to have, the total spacing, the total length, and the horizontal and vertical directions. And basically from here, we can input in two directions. So we've got a number of copies set to 2, and we're spacing them out by a certain distance. You can choose how many copies for each one we're going to do. And then we could also use the arrows, or total length. We can use the arrows to adjust where the spacing is going to be. So if we highlight and select the arrows, we could drag them to a point, and then drag them to a point, increasing, decreasing the number of copies on the fly as we go throughout. So you can see how we drag those to a point, it automatically changes their distance lengths, you increase and decrease the number of holes, and it makes it really easy to create a whole pattern. So now we'll go into radial. So radial pattern, if we select the radial option here, we select a group of faces, select the other group of faces here, select an application point for where that radial pattern is going to center around. Controlling the distance or the radius of it, you now have the ability to move, copy, do multiple copies, etc. So if I go to copy, you can see how it's creating a copy. We just change the distance of those parameters, and you can also input in an angle. So good for, like, let's say creating a fan blade or anything like that. You'll see when we put in an angle, you see how it's spinning those holes around that application point. So create, edit blends, and create, edit chamfers. The naming has changed a little bit, and there's been some really nice enhancements to both of these commands. So the attributes are attached to the faces and created with the blends and chamfers and edits after. It is now also possible to edit the blend type, constant, variable, setback, to change original values, and you have combined picking and adding of elements through edges and face selection. There's a new option within these called limits, which allow you to limit where the blend and chamfer are actually going to be created on a block. So you'll see that here in this video example. So we'll go to create edit blends. We pick the blend edges. You can see how we have under the advanced area, we have this set by limits. You can set the limits by a point. When we select a point, we pick the point, and you can see how we can stop that blend at that point. So it leaves the rest as the original edge, which is a huge command. Saves you a lot of time having to do cut bodies, so no longer are you having to do that. We can cut it along a plane, reverse the sides of that plane as well. So when you're selecting, you can increase and decrease where that plane is going to be and stop the blends on the fly where you want them to stop. You can do this by entities. If you have an existing surface or existing entity in there, you can select the entity and it will basically stop that blend at that entity. Again, choosing reverse side if you wanted to as well, but you can see how you can improve how your blend is going to be created, so it's preventing you from having to use cut body and then rejoining your entities back together. So by plane, by entity, by points. This is a huge enhancement to the blend and chamfer command, which is going to save a lot of time and steps. Thicken the surface. There's a new option called Advanced Repair, which improves the surface quality when it comes to if you're doing a thicken the surface, which essentially actually is changing this into a solid. So on more complex areas, this command will help you out. And within swing elements, there's new functionality that gives you the ability to swing a face inside of a body. You also have the ability to swing a solid with a calculation of spun section as well. So within sectional elements, there is the ability to simplify curves. Within the sectional elements, you have the ability to select two new options, repoint and convert to segments and arcs. The convert to segments and arcs is really nice because what that's going to do is it's going to make it easier for modeling after. So these new options also create a rotational and a radial section as well. Within extrude elements, this command has been improved with several enhancements. So you now have the ability to connect belonging edges by a chain. So for draft angles that are applied to the same element, you can also do that. It is also possible to extrude to an entity with an offset. So this option is called concatenate elements. So it treats the element like a single entity when you're doing your extrusion. So there's also some new enhancements to it, such as offset and thicken in the advanced tab. So you have the ability to offset your extrusion and thicken it to whatever direction you want to thicken it. So here's just a quick video showing some of those enhancements. So within here, I select this face edge. Within the distance, you can see how we can extrude this up. If I put in a shape angle, it's extruding this as a sheet body. You can start to see how it's starting to do an overlap. Previous versions didn't let you do that, but the new enhancement to this is called concatenate elements, which joins those elements together. It'll also turn it into a solid or keep it as a sheet. So it's basically doing the trimming for you using concatenate elements. If I uncheck that, you can see how they're basically going through each other. So continuing on with the extrude elements, whether you're picking faces, whether you're picking edges, we're going to go over the offset and thicken as well. So if we select this entity here with the face edges, we go to we reset our taper angle, we go to the advanced tab. We're going to extrude as a sheet body. And then go into the advanced tab, you have the ability to input in a offset. So if we do an offset of this part, you can see how it's offsetting that entity. We could reverse the direction, create as a interior or not. We could do a thicken a surface, which essentially makes it into a solid. We could do both sides, and we can start really manipulating how this data is going to be imported in. Continuing on with the thicken the surface, you now have the ability to select faces, and it's possible to create separate bodies, just like with extrude elements. And then within blend between faces, there's a new graphic slider within the command as well. And then within edit faces, there have been some improvements with the parasol function when it comes to rotating imprinted faces for external edges. Within the cavity Boolean options, there's a new subtract mode. It is also possible to insert in an offset value, and you have a preview of the part that is being subtracted using graphic dots and representations. So this is a nice enhancement to be able to see what the preview looks like of the subtracted cavity when it comes to doing an offset. This option is available in the following commands. You've got cuboid, cylinder, torus, cone, sphere, prism, cylinder, extrude, thicken, swept profile, and swing elements. So within bend relief, the results have been improved to, or basically when the selection is done by a window, you now have the ability to do repeat on element. This is a new command to replicate the parts along an edge or along a element. So this brand new command under the edit dropdown is called repeat on element. Basically what it allows you to do is it allows you to select an element and repeat it from an application point off of a curve, off of an edge. It allows you to repeat that element following the orientation of that edge. You can choose how many instances you want. You can choose whether it's normal to the curve, so basically making adjustments from that. You could do normal to body. You could do normal to a work plane orientation. You can draw the orientations to see what the positioning is, and you can retain the original body, other side, etc. So repeat on element allows you to pick an element and swing it around a curved area. You could choose the distance, the length parameter that this is going to be based off of, or you could have it automatically follow the curve completely as well. You rotate those around, other side, front side, back side, etc. Delete extract faces. Within delete and detach faces, there's a new option called propagate over tangent or over adjacent blends. The propagate option allows you to entirely chain the blend or delete any selected blends. So it's a nice command for being able to pick an individual blend and delete and heal it, and it cleanly delete and heals it. I can tell you, doing some of our training examples, this has vastly improved some of the quality of how we would be approaching this compared to previous versions. Consistent behavior for planar cups and edit constant radius blends has also been improved within this command as well. So you can see in the picture here, you can see how we could propagate over adjacent blends, which basically allows you to select one face and heal off all the blends, or you just pick that individual face and it only heals that individual face. Within mark edges as relevant, you now have the ability to do this within project elements and isocline curves. So if you are using project elements and you're imprinting an edge on there, you now can use the mark as relevant to save yourself a step, so you don't have to go into mark, unmark, relevant edges. So this is built into the project elements and isocline curves. Within draft faces, there's an option to reapply blends to the faces that are selected as well. So we're going to go into some of the surfacing commands. There's a brand new command called swept with a spline. So this option allows you to create a surface sweeping across two drive curves. Within pipe surface, the command has been enhanced to create edges, connecting points with profiles, and it allows you to better manage uniform radiuses for thickened surfaces. So we're going to go over the brand new command called swept with a spline. So under the surfaces drop down, we can select swept with spline, and we pick our drive curves, we pick our spline curve, and what that's going to do is along that entire curve, it's going to retain that swept area. This is very similar to how we would do one drive two shape. As you can see how the shape is being created, but if we have multiple different splines, it's going to interact and it's going to figure out what the surface needs to look like with that. So we can use a second drive curve, use a middle curve, etc. So if we say use middle curve, you can see how it's going to update the values off of that as well. We can show sections or be able to pick sections within this as well. And you can see all the dotted line representations using that initial drive curve that we selected as well. So we can go back to using first drive curve, and you can see how the results are going to vary from that. So it's a nice command for creating these surfaces and creating the clean surfaces in between. So if we go back a step, go back to where we selected our drive curve, we select this one instead, and you can see how it's going to take the form and the shape of that spline curve in between those two sections. So it allows you to create the surfacing between those two areas. So if we go back once more, pick this section right here. And then from that, it's going to allow you to show the shape of that curve as well. So within ruled surface, the command has been improved to allow you to control off of synchronized points, be able to manipulate slides that allow you to the possibility to better connect entities with different number of elements. So basically it eliminates you from having to use the move ends if your endpoints, your spline lines are different between the top and the bottom areas. And with surface between OneDrive 2 shape, it is now an option to be able to select the second shape rather than forcing you to pick the second shape. So if your first shape curve is the same as your second shape curve, you don't have to select it twice. So here's just a quick example of that. So we have optional area for our second shape curve. So we pick this, we pick our shape, we pick our application point for that shape it's going to ride, it automatically creates it. Versus if I went to check the box for second shape, I now have the ability to pick the second shape and pick that area. So as you can see, it's going to vastly improve that selection option. So we'll go into the new CAD and plot view dimension areas. So within plot view, we now have the ability to use draw axis origin. This new option is available under the options tab and multi-view tab. So basically you could choose whether it's going to draw no orientation or origin. You can do it on both sides. You could do it on the X side or the Y side. So the default can be set under System, Plot View, and Options and Multi-View. So you can see there's where your options are. So when it's on both sides, it corresponds with both sides in the multi-view creation. So within view properties, it's now possible to change the scaling of multiple views at one time. So when you select multiple views, you can change the scaling of those multiple views at one time. It is possible to edit the scaling of the views to move to another position. You can keep old views, you can turn them off, you can do view modes, you can move from point to point, increment translations, etc. And within single element, you can actually do real annotations on broken views, and it is now possible to select two elements using the control key as well. So within detail views, you also have the ability to edit these detail views, change the size of them, move the positioning of them, etc. So when you're creating a detail view, you can move them. So we'll go over the single element first, being able to edit and modify those single elements. So if I pick, like, let's say this entity to this entity, you can see how it automatically creates that broken view. Automatically is going to dimension it at its full scale still. So if I pick, let's say, this line to this line as well, it does the same thing. So I can use control and I can basically select multiple different entities. So here again, this is the detail view. You can see how it still creates that break in the detail view as well. It's doing both. So from here, we can also edit a detail view that was previously created. So you can see how we select the view, we create a detail, it creates that detail, looks great. But let's say we need to modify or manipulate that detail again. We press that button with 3 dots, pick the detail, or pick the dotted line with the detail, you change the size of it, make it smaller, change the location of it, and it's going to edit and modify that detail view after it was already created. So previously you had to undo it and then redo it to be able to achieve what we're trying to achieve. So going off of this rectangle detail view that's already created here, you can change the lengths of it, change the parameters of it, and you can make it longer, shorter, change where the center application point is, etc. So if we change the length of it, you can see how it's going to create that detail view, and you can edit the existing detail view after it's already created. There's that detail view there. After we confirm, you can see how it changes the size. So within feature visibility, this was again another requested request from our customers. So under the general tab, you have the ability to hide circle crosses, hide section line crosses, and you have the ability to apply these conditions to all plot view pages. So under the General tab inside of Plot View Manager, you have the ability to hide these. When you're exporting out a DWG file, these circle crosses will not export out when they're not visible. So we're going to go into the analysis enhancements. Within Dynamic Section, there's a new option in the dialog to show you the instance distance from an active origin. You can simplify. When you're creating a section, you could repoint and convert the lines to arcs, just like with the sectional elements. So the command Dynamic Section and Sectional Elements allows you to align and simplify your options. It is also possible to load and save default values within the Dynamic Section. Again, another one requested by many people. So if you have certain settings set, you now can save those as defaults for Dynamic Section. Face Type Analyzer. This is a brand new command, kind of a continuation of Surface Analyzer, to allow you to basically scan your faces, see what type of faces they are, whether they're planes, blends, features, etc., holes. So under the analysis dropdown, this new command is called Face Type Analyzer. It allows you to analyze a group of faces. So we'll show that in this video example here. If I go to Analysis and I select Face Type Analyzer, you can see how all of our planes select as a blue color, your cylinder select as yellow, cone select as the darker green, torus is in red, etc. So you could actually use your Face Type Analyzer to see what color codes each item is. You can display tool info, so when you're hovering over something, it gives you the information about what that face type is. And you can also scan what the radius is, like if you're looking at a blend, looking at a hole, etc. So you can turn on and off different things. You look at the planar face, and based on whether it's parallel, perpendicular, or other, it's going to highlight that face off of whatever your active work plane is. So if it's parallel to the work plane, it shows up here. If it's perpendicular, it shows up here. And if it's an other, such as an angle, it shows up there. When you're hovering over with the tooltip info, it gives you the angle, it gives you the information about it. So this is a nice command for quickly analyzing your part and showing color codes. You could apply these face colors to your specific part or just view them in an analysis such as what we're doing. So if I, let's say, left click to place it, it actually places a label on that telling you what it is. So if we say face type or the planar face analysis, you can basically select certain faces and display a label for them. So you select create label, apply colors to face. If you confirm it, it applies the colors to the face. If you uncheck it, it reverts the colors back, but keeps the labels there if you choose to. Detect small and sliver faces. This command, which was existing, has had some improvements to it. When you're using sliver faces, you now can display a label for each sliver face. The label area can be created by clicking on the face type info as well. So you have an option to create a label and confirm the detect mode, and you have more options available for similar delete extract faces within this command as well. So the option shows uniform colors and analyze bodies during the preview, and you have the ability to use repair or heal on these areas as well as sew bodies. So we could grow and shrink adjacent faces as well within the small and sliver faces. So you can see here's a dialog and some of the new enhancements that have been improved with the detect small and sliver faces. So here's just a quick video of it. You can see how the icon improved as well. So if we go in here, we select it, you can see all the labels for any small and sliver faces based on the certain minimum area that you have selected. You can see how it's highlighting all of those minimum faces. So we can apply unique face colors to it. We could apply unique face colors to the bodies that you're selecting. You can delete and heal them. You can extract them. You can detach them, etc. You could use sew bodies, which sews the bodies up, and so on. So you can grow, shrink them, etc. So within Manage Inspection Points, there have been several enhancements added to this. So in 2022.0, they introduced Manage Inspection Points, which allows you to create points for CMM or probing. Within this version, we now can use the selecting relevant points to do a projection on a face of a selected body. You can select point sets that allow for all points to be selected and projected on the face. You can manage minimum distance between the selected points, and you have the ability to select points on a mesh model as well. You have the option to show, hide the labels and graphics, and you can simulate the part and check collisions. So here's just a quick video example of that. So we're going to use manage inspection points. So we pick the entity. We've got a group of points here that we could select from as well. You could pick and manually pick those points, or you can select the point or the point sets, which allows you to create an inspection point area. So we can show labels, we can turn on and off the labels, you can show the order or turn on and off the order, you can turn on and off the path, etc. So within here, we could also go into displaying our sensor. When we display our sensor, we could show a simulated video between each step or between each point, so you can see what that video is going to do. You can change the speed of that video, etc. So you can see how it's showing a simulation of what the sensor looks like, turning on and off the sensor as well. And you could turn on and off the labels too. So we're going to go into mold and flow and some of the enhancements that have been done with both of these. So within tool design, there have been some improvements with the tool design based on customer feedback for some of your suppliers, some of your libraries. Within tool cavities, you now have the ability to set an offset for cylindrical cavities in an X and Y direction. Additionally, cylinders and cavities can be created within the tool cavities and can be modified within Edit Multi-Simple features as well. So here's just a quick video of that. So we go into tool cavities. We can select our edges off of this. We can do cylinders on edge or cylinders on rope, choosing the direction, X or Y for your offsets. And you can actually choose to offset where that circle is going to be. So you got your clearance diameter, whatever it's going to be, you set the values, and you can do an X and Y offset for those circles. So you can offset it in any one of those directions. So you can fit it better to what you want your cavity to be. Going into the second example, we select this entity here. And you can see how we have our different edges, different groups, and you can also do an XY offset off of this. So you basically, where your circles are, these are more so previews. You can increase or you can decrease wherever those circles are. So I'll set an XYZ offset to whatever they are, and you can see how it's going to vastly improve how your positioning is for your tool cavities. So within this example, we've created our cavities as drill holes. If you want to edit or modify those holes after the fact, you go to Edit Multi-Simple Features. You've got the holes selected here, and you can actually edit them all at one time through this command. So if we hit the checkbox, you can see how it brings in those drill holes. You can type in whatever value that you want, and these are recognized as Feature Manager holes for machining later. So you can display the features, you can see how the features are created, you got your drill diameters, etc. So if I go into here, select those holes again, you can choose and change the direction of where they're going to be associated to, and you can basically do your shift values from that. Okay, so we're going to go into some of the flow analysis stuff. So the mold flow in previous versions has been improved to make it more accurate for filling validations and cooling. The speeds have been vastly improved in 2022.1. Doing my testing, I can confirm this. So here's just a little chart of how the speeds have been improved with the more accurate flow analysis. So in a benchmark, the parts have been reprocessed to show the improvements. So there's a new calculation engine for runners, repetition, annular 3D runners, hot tips, managed by the flow algorithm for improved results. It is sequential, or the sequential molding module will allow you to work on any part of any size in any family or mold to be calculated. So you can display STL results. An enhanced visualization allows you to show the mesh boundaries and has been added to display the results. This activation for mesh translate or transparent improvement modes allows you to see through the part, so you can actually see what the transparency of the part looks like during the isocline or during the plastic injection. So there's also been some improvements to the packing calculation. It's now possible to run the holding calculation on non-optical filling conditions. So there will be a warning message, for example, if you are going to have a frozen element, or let's say the plastic freezes before it fills the entire part. It will give you a warning about that. So within the comparison of deform and original models, you now have some new options to compare the differences between the original model and the deformed part to set tolerances and be able to better accurately read your warbage results. The system now has a graphical result showing the difference between colors as well. And you can see how inside the color chart, the more accurate or the more differences the highlighted area has, the bigger the color bar is going to be. And we'll go into some of the new features within Progress. The main features here are within part unfolding. You have the ability to unfold a sharp edge within part unfolding. The solid part does not have to have a blend in it to be able to do your part unfold. The new command for part unfolding allows you to set your defaults as well. So there's a new option called part unfolding options, and you can set defaults for your thicknesses, for your fiber algorithm, etc. So if we go to part unfolding, we do a step unfold. You can see how inside this part we still have the ability to do our blended edges or our linear edges, but you also have the capability of doing this off of a sharp area as well. So for example, we're doing our unfold step by steps. We go to that sharp angle, we pick an edge. We pick the edge of that sharp angle, and it automatically recognizes the blend sizes for the angle that you needed to unfold at. So even though it was a sharp angle, when we pick that edge, it does work. So also within part unfolding, we now have part unfolding options where you can control what your part unfolding options are, such as colors, blends, etc. So if we do our natural fiber type, we choose the default fiber type it's going to update when we do our part definition. It's going to update to that relevant data. So when we set the defaults, it's going to stick to those defaults for whatever we're controlling. So if we go into our next step here, so part flange unfolding, you now have the capability of choosing the unfolding type. For example, if you're changing from MSC to FTI, you have the ability to do that. This option is under the part unfolding options as well. You can change between the different types. So there's a new option called tangent spline or tangent by spline in the binder options. This allows you to create a smooth binder, which improves the surface quality as well. So a new option for deformation has been added within MSC unfolding types as well to combine the two functions for the original bend shape. So here's just an example of being able to change those options from FTI to MSC. So for example, we can select a blank here, and you can show the little, you can show the calculation bar. You can see how long it takes with FTI to be able to do this. And basically, it's showing that it created this mesh in about 1.5 minutes with a blank. So if I start here and I use spring back, you can see how with FTI, it increases that time speed to 1 minute and 38 seconds. Obviously, fast forward through it. But if we change our mesh type from FTI to MSC, just another option to be able to change, you can actually go in, select the part, and you can see the duration or the time that it's going to use to be able to create your blank. So if we go into here, create the mesh, we're speeding up the time. About 38 seconds in, it creates that mesh. So we went from about 1 minute and 20 to 39 seconds. And then if we start again, we create our blank, we're at about 50 seconds versus about 1.5 minutes as well. And then if we want to create a spring back, the spring back calculation is done in roughly about 1 minute. So we're saving a little bit of time with that. So it's just a new option to be able to do your blanking. So if we go to flange, we could do basically the same type of thing. So within flange, you could choose between the two new options as well. So as you can see, you got our blank option here, and then you could select the other one. That was done with FTI. You can select the other one, and you can do this one with MSC. So it just gives you some more options to be able to do your unfolds. So flange on a curve along a direction. This feature has been completely improved, which allows you to now have the ability to pick an electrical pin or small component by defining the rotation and basically making it so when you're doing your unfold, those do not unfold until you specify they're going to unfold. So the system allows you to constrain features or fins to preserve the shape during the unfolding process. So the solution allows you to control the whole process. So basically you choose when those pins are going to unfold. And going on with standard elements, within the mold progress insert elements, we have seen some vast improvements with progressive, self-lube, DME, Misumi, Museberger, Strack. Within the standard elements, you now have the ability to control and add angles off of relative work planes. This works great for locks within ejector pins. So here's just our quick video example of this. So if we go to progressive, we go into our ejector pins, we select our pins, we select the point we want those to be created off of, we can choose the size that we want it to be created off of, import any kind of locks or anything like that, and we have the ability to choose the angle of these. So as you can see, there's our locks, we can confirm. And what's nice about this is if we go to mirror and we select that pin with the lock and we choose an application point for where we're mirroring this around, it actually mirrors it around if we do like a four-sided, and it actually is going to apply the lock angle accurately when it comes to creating the locks around our part with those ejector pins. So if I switch to a relative work plane, repeat that same process, it works off of relative work planes as well. So we select this one to this one. We pick our application point to where we want it to be. You can see how that lock is also in relevance to that. So we can change the angle on the fly, and we do our rotations. It's all in relative to whatever the active work plane is. The same thing applies for when we're doing a mirror. So we pick our application points again. It's all relative to wherever our mirror is going to be. So you can see how the angles retain, and it's accurately and cleanly moving stuff from one place to another. Optional plates. You now have the ability to create a component without actually having to select a block. So if there's existing cavities, for example, you have an imported file with existing cavities, you now have the ability to create your components without actually selecting the plates. You just choose an application point. You could change the sizes of these components on the fly if needed. So it's optional if you have to pick the plate or not. So here's just a quick video example of that as well. So if we go to, let's just say, our leader pins, and we select a leader pin here, we can skip the start and end plates, and we can actually pick the application point where that's going to be. You change the size of it to whatever you need it to be to fit inside that cavity, and you can see how it's changing that cavity size. You can change the custom lengths. It still builds a component without actually having to select the plate. You can duplicate this process across the board as well, and you can basically select that component even without actually picking a start and end plate. So within the standard elements, we have a sphere. This can be used to create a relative coordinate point. It is possible to show the dragging of the sphere as well when it comes to creating components. So just like with that edit elements, you have the ability to type in an offset value, or you can see the XYZ components from the work plane where that sphere is going to be. And within Assembly Manager, there have been some additional data improvements to notes, such as for nitro gas cylinders. So within here, it actually adds some additional notes for those. You now have the ability to remove the assembly names from the Assembly Manager tree as well. So, for example, you can remove those Assembly Manager names too. And it is also possible to dissolve groups inside of a parts list, whereas previously you had to do this through the assembly view. And now we'll go into reverse. So within mesh features, you now have a new feature that has been improved upon during the analysis, which detects splits of the data for direct entities such as for planes, cylinders, and other shapes. Within Mesh to Surface, this feature has been improved to ensure better results, especially during the selection of triangles, and adding new options that can help you during the surface creation automatically switch between an analytical surface if possible. Within planes, radiuses, spheres, cones from Mesh, you have the ability with all three of these to allow for mesh selection as an input. This is very useful in cases the user has split the mesh into different meshes analyzed by the mesh features. There are three new options for different solutions within these commands: seed points, triangles, and mesh. You also have the ability to set an exact coordinate for the position and the axis, and you can evaluate the results for quicker comparison as well. Within alignment, this feature has been improved by adding several methods to allow different opportunities and selection for the best of each case. So the added options are elements, so you can choose between points, segments, arcs, radiuses, cylinders to align the entities to. Work planes, this will align it to a reference work plane. And best fit, in cases you only need to refine the alignment, this option will allow you to do that. And within Compare, this feature has been improved by adding some new parameters that allow you to configure the color map and thus better evaluate the results. So the results can now be displayed on both entities, and you can set maximum distance values, and you can define the limits of the color bar. Additionally, the smooth color mapping has been improved while preserving the customized color.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into the CAM side. At first, we'll take a look at the user interface. There has been an awesome improvement to be able to actually update cutting conditions automatically. Say you have an operation that is using a specific tool and other operations are also using that tool. If you change the feed and speed of that tool, it can now update for the other operations cutting conditions as well, meaning that you do not have to go through and select each operation that's using that same tool and change it. This can be all done at once. This is a checkbox that can be used in the CAM settings. So if you do want to use it, it is available, but this is definitely something that will be a big time saver. Let's look at the machining time. This is an awesome enhancement that's been added. So instead of going through query to gather your machining time, you can now just highlight it inside of the CAM navigator, and this will populate on the left-hand side of your model view. This means that there is less clicks, less commands you have to go through to get this information. With the tool reports, you can now select a tool report or an operation report, and that will become the default for that file, meaning that you don't have to choose what one you want to use every single time you go to create a new one. This will automatically retain as a default. Let's get into the electrode machining. Let's look at the template user interface. You can now include templates for roughing, semi-finishing, finishing, and polishing, as well as an oversized value. This will make the creation of those operations a lot faster, being able to utilize many different templates at once. Also, with the template user interface, you now have an option to include a Z angle rotation value, meaning that you do not have to go through and adjust your different CAM setups after they've been created. You can do this before they get generated, meaning that if you need to accommodate for, say, different setups, you can add that rotation as needed during the actual initial creation of those operations. Let's get into the 2.5 axis CAM. The new engine will help with the time that it takes to create a toolpath. Also, we have the new parameter called tool holder check. With this, you'll be able to automatically trim toolpaths to be able to avoid collisions with the tool holder. This is an awesome enhancement, and this has been included for pocketing, profiling, remachining, and chamfering. Now we can actually use holder collision for 2.5 axis operations. As we can see here, we got a couple different collisions with our holder marked in red. Typically, bosses don't really like when your holder collides into the part. Typically not a good sound either, so we want to avoid doing that. With the 2.5 axis operations, we now are able to do that more efficiently when it comes to avoiding those holders against the part. Let's go ahead and look at this tool holder check. Let's turn this on, so once we regenerate the operation, you'll see that there is areas of the tool path that are cut out, meaning that this is avoiding that collision. Let's look at the 3-axis cam. With the waveform roughing operation, there has been many enhancements added to it. You can now utilize expand value. This will allow you to select a checkbox and will allow the tool to actually work outside of the normal bounds that is given. Let's take a look at an example. We have two different operations. They are duplicated. They are the same exact operation. One has the expand value not checked, like this one. The other one does have it checked. So if we look at the kinematics, we're going to see that the tool is going to be working from the inside out. As you can see, we are helicaling down. Now when you're working with harder material, this can cause issues with tip breakage, more pressure on the tool when it's working in a downward fashion into the part, meaning that the chance of your chips actually welding into the flutes of your tool is higher. Just a lot more issues can happen when you're trying to plunge into a part like that. But with this expand value checked, we now have the option to be able to actually have our tool approach from the outside of the part and be able to work from an outward in fashion. Now this will help the user save their tools on the life of it and be able to actually avoid working with plunging operations. Now avoiding the helical, you can also save on machining time. So that means that the tool is not taking more time to spiral into the part. It is actually being able to get to the depth that it needs to a lot quicker. Now with the waveform operation, you now have the option to disable the retract step down. This may be useful for users that want to use inserted cutters that have a shallower depth of cut, but they still want the tricoidal movement. So with this checkbox, you can uncheck this, so now you don't have to input the same value for the step down and retract step down. You can just avoid the retract step down altogether. Next, we have drill points for plunging for the waveform roughing operation. You can actually pick the different drill points that you want your tool to plunge through, meaning that if you took a drill, drilled out some areas, and you don't want to helical into those areas, you want to use that drill hole to actually take your tool and plunge into and then start the operation from there. Now I have the option to be able to do that. Let's go ahead and take a look at this option. It's under the plunging method. As you can see here, we have a couple different pockets that we're helicaling into. Now I can choose the use drill points. One thing to note, we do have to determine a pre-drill diameter. So let's go through, select these different points. And once we generate this operation, we can see that the tool will be plunging into those drilled points. Now this can help reduce the helical movements, meaning that it is speeding up the operation time significantly. And this is good for people that are trying to just clear out material with those drills and being able to snake their tool down in that area. Next, we have the helix diameter. We can adjust that diameter from 20 to 99% of the tool's diameter. This will allow the tool to be able to get into areas that it wasn't able to beforehand because that helix diameter was too big as a default. The tool would actually violate the sides of the part. So now you can use bigger tools in thinner areas than you could beforehand with the waveform roughing operation. Also, chip prevention has been included with the waveform operation. Chip prevention will help avoid thin wall creation when it's cutting stock, so that your tool will not be trying to remove thin walls. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of the chip prevention. Right now we have this turned off. So when it actually goes to cut the part, what's going to happen is there's going to be thin walls that could be generated if you not have chip prevention turned on. And thin walls are never any good for the part. As you know, loud harmonics can occur when you're cutting thin walls, and depending on the depth of your cut. And when the actual harmonics are happening is the tool is chattering against that thin wall, which means that's interrupted cuts, and that is never any good for your tool's life. This can cause chipping, this could cause breaking of the tool. It is just generally something you want to avoid when you're cutting your material. As you can see, once we get to an area where it is starting to become a thin wall, with the chip prevention turned on, this will recognize those thin walls and actually start from the tip of it and start to cut it down, making more of a rigid cut. Now, this will definitely help with your tool's life and with how loud those harmonics are getting. It'll cut down on that. Let's get into 5-axis cam. Now we have an inclusion of 3 to 5 axis tilting. This has been officially released in 2022.1, and this will allow the user to be able to take operations that are built in 3-axis fashion and be able to add a 5-axis tilt very easily. This will be absolutely huge for the 5-axis machinists. Let's go ahead and take a look at the different tilt methods that are in 3 to 5. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the different strategy types of the 3 to 5. We have vertical versus constant. Vertical meaning that it'll try to retain a straight up and down cut until it gets to an area where it is recognizing collision with a part against the holder. Then it'll try to create an angle to tilt away from the part. With constant, it'll try to tilt at a constant angle and will remain at the angle the entire cut throughout. Let's go ahead and take a look at this new user interface. So if you right click on the 3-axis operation, you can go to transform operation, and this will be under 3 to 5. We have a few different strategy types. We can also input different information such as max angle, lead angle, constant angle, whatever it may be. So as we look at the different variation of this operation now, we can take a look at the tilts. As you can see, this will cut the part and try to remain vertical as long as it can until it recognizes that there is a collision. Once it starts getting farther down the part, the holder is getting closer to the part model, and it will try to avoid that. Next, we'll go ahead and look at the constant to axis strategy type. We got a max angle and a constant angle that we can input. So our constant angle is 25 degrees and our max angle is 60. Now this operation will try to have a constant tilt to it. This may be good for trying to keep a specific surface finish on this part. But as you can see, as it's working its way down, it is remaining at a constant tilt angle. Let's go ahead and take a look at this in action. As you can see, it's remaining at constant angle throughout. With the no change versus normal to face strategy types, you can insert a normal angle that's assigned in the parameters. There's little change in tilt degree until it recognizes a change in the direction of the holder and needs to be made to be able to avoid that collision. Now, normal to face, this will recognize the face is normal and try to make that tilt retain to the normal of that face, meaning that there is a bit more variation of the tilt degree along that toolpath. Constant guided attraction and repulsion. Now, this is good for actually cutting on outsides and insides of parts, maybe in a radial fashion. Let's go ahead and take a look at what these do. So let's go ahead and look at constant attracting. We'll input a constant angle and a max angle that the tool can tilt to, and we'll select a drive curve. With this constant attracting, it's going to use that drive curve as a general direction that the tool will want to tilt towards, but it'll look more towards the constant angle that you input to try to retain that angle as it's working its way down. Next, we'll go ahead and take a look at guiding attracting. So this will actually use a drive curve and make it more of a literal guide to it. As you can see, the tool's center is wanting to angle towards that drive curve. But once it recognizes an area where it's going to actually collide in with the part, with the holder, then it'll make the appropriate adjustments to be able to avoid that collision. Constant repulsive. So this is good for maybe working on the outside of a part, creating a drive curve and wanting your tool to actually point away from it. So as you can see, with that constant option, is looking at a constant angle. So it'll stay at a constant angle going down with the tool tilting away from it. Now with the guiding repulsive, it'll work the same way as guiding attracting, but it'll try to repel away from that drive curve. So it'll retain that center line lined up with the drive curve, and as it's working its way down, it'll start making the angle changes to keep that center line lined up. Now, if we have a max angle determined, we can avoid it from having it tilt at such a degree. So this is just under 90 degrees. Guided surface. Let's go ahead and take a look at what this option does. This will allow you to choose a line as a direction. As you can see here, we have a raster operation going over top of this part. We'll use the 3 to 5 on this and use guided surface. We can have this line chosen as a direction, and then we can input which axis we want our tool to constrain to. As you can see here, our tilts are looking at the line that's above and wanting our tool to travel along that line in that direction. Now once it gets to an area where it has to change, you'll see that there is a gradual change in direction. Next, we'll get into the 5-axis operation interface. As you can see here, we have the optimized automatic arc option. Now when linking toolpaths together from one path to another, we can choose an automatic arc value under the lead-in type, And then the tool axis orientation we could set to automatic as well, meaning that the machining time is going to be reduced because we have tighter arcs that are linking to each other. Under the tool axis control, you can choose the option to utilize a surface normal to fix your tool's tilted angle at. As you can see here, we have the back surface that is using for the guiding surface, and it's taking the tool's tilt and making it normal to that surface. With deburring, there's been enhancements added. You can now create a mesh entity around an area to contain where that deburring is going to happen. With the deburring, you have the option to utilize the spiralized closed contours, meaning that there is a smoother tool path, less machine movements, less witness marks on the edges, meaning that it'll create a nice spiral tool path when you have things like heavier chamfers or heavier blends. This will just be a general improvement on the deburring end. Now with the multi-axis roughing, you can now choose fixture surfaces, meaning that the user can have more flexibility when it comes to the holder collision detection. So you can actually choose a different value that you want stock to be left when you're coming up to fixture surfaces versus the value that you're going to have stock to leave when it comes to part surfaces or floor surfaces. With the multi-axis roughing, there's now an option for interpolation tilt angles. What this will allow is the user to be able to determine discrete angle steps for retract links. This option gives full control of how the linking method is calculated by the user, allowing flexibility of the linking logic, and has no dependence on the system to determine the angles of those links. Let's go ahead and take a look at wire EDM. Now, when you're going to post out your program, you have the option to show the machine configuration before the program is outputted. Meaning that if you're utilizing different machine models, you can quickly change which machine model you're using, or if there is constant changes that you're making to the configuration, you can now have that configuration pop up before the posted program is outputted. A huge change has been made to the modify internal corners. Now, beforehand, you could use modify internal corners to help with the different intersecting points, but you couldn't change the size that your radius is in those little corners. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of this. Over here, we have crisscrossing of the wire path. Now, the standard modify internal corners will fix this problem, but when it comes to creating roughing passes, that is where we may come across an issue. Now, we have a thin slotted area over here, and we have larger step overs for that wire path to cut. So once we utilize this modify internal corners option, we will see that the outer roughing pass will not be able to get into this area. As you can see, it stops right at the end. It's because those internal corners, the radius is too large for that wire path to actually accept, as you can see here. So if we were actually able to adjust the size of this internal corner, now we can. So let's go ahead and go into the wire path, and let's adjust the size of this radius, making it smaller. Now we'll be able to actually have room for our wire to actually snake through this thin slotted area. As you can see, that radius is adjusted in the corner, allowing the wire to be able to make that outer roughing path. Now we can utilize critical conditions check with the wire paths. When it recognizes that there's a collision, then it will actually highlight orange, letting the user know that there's an issue. And then it'll also give us information inside of the log window saying which feature it is, which operation, and then also it'll give a suggestion on how to fix this problem.
And thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more videos. If you have any questions or like to see a live demo, you can contact us at 248-922-9293 or by visiting our website, tsd-software.com.